Coming to this wonderful session with our fundraising masterclasses that we offer through Catalyst 2030. Today's speaker, I'm so thrilled to have our two speakers today. Lisa Corcoran, she has just been a gem, and you will love how she does her training and planning for this session. And then Rose is also joining us as well, and I'll have her introduce Rose later. But she runs an organization in Kenya that works with people that are coming out of the prison system and teaching them entrepreneurship, which is super exciting. But first, I wanted to give the highlights of Lisa. If you have not heard her before in one of our fundraising masterclasses, she is wonderful. She did some really interesting things back when she was younger, went to law school, was the Army's Judge Advocate General Corps, which was fun, out of Washington. She left active duty. So how many people are actually active duty attorneys? I love that. And joined the Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. So she just has this heart and love for social entrepreneurs and working with people that are changing systems around the world. Throughout her time with the government, she's worked abroad and at home in the US. She's developed a long association with several organizations, really focusing on impact and leadership and development. She does these training sessions for organizations around the world, and we are just excited to have her here with us. She is part of an organization that is a public interest organization, the Stratigise Group, and wants to work with more impact organizations. So if yours is interested, feel free to reach out to her after this session. As always, we'd love for you to be on camera so that our speakers can see you while they're chatting, but we also understand sometimes we cannot do that. So if you're able to join us on camera. But Lisa, I will pass it on to you, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Debbie. A funny piece about my government service, which was about 12 years in total. While I served as a employee of the US government, I tried all the while to serve on boards of nonprofits. That's where my heart always lay. And so I would join these boards and I would say, I studied nonprofit law. I'm a lawyer. I'm here to help with legal stuff. And this is such like a taste of my own medicine, because this is what happens when you become proud or have hubris. They would always say, oh, that's great. Help us fill out one form one time a year, but the rest of the year, can you help us fundraise? And so it was just so funny for me to realize that I thought I had like this toolkit of legal strategies that would be helpful, and much to my dismay. And it was like a sobering reality that most organizations needed help with resource mobilization. And it's something that nobody's really trained on how to do. So during many of my board services, that's when I started to learn about For Impact and their work across the sector. So when it came time for me to leave government service in 2016, it was a quick and easy jump to start this work. It's funny, when I think about fundraising, what I love the most about it is that it can if we do it right and we do it efficiently, it can free up some mental space for our amazing leaders out there in the sector who are doing the really hard work. I hate to think about leaders in the social space losing sleep at night because they don't know where the next 6 months income is going to come from, or they don't know what they're going to do next year and they're trying to pay their team. So if we can help free up some space so that they can use their brains and their passion to do the work on the ground, then I feel great about it. So thank you guys so much for having me. I was lucky to do one of these sessions 6 months ago. And when I looked back at the end of 2022 and thought about the year, it was hands down a highlight of the year for me. It's an absolute honor to be here. I'm such a humongous fan of the Catalyst 2030 community. What you all are doing is incredible. We can do better together. So thank you for having me here. I'm honored is an understatement to be here. A quick little bit about For Impact, where I come from. We are a social enterprise. We're based in the United States, and we help organizations across the sector tell their stories, fund their visions, and develop their teams. We work around the world with organizations as small as all volunteer community-based organizations, in rural settings, to large INGOs with budgets the size of small countries. We've been around for about 30 years, had worked with over 5,000 organizations. What I love the most about our work, though, is that in any given year, Around 35 to 40% of our work is with funders. So funders will come and ask us to come in and train their grantee portfolio. This is foundations, sometimes this is individual philanthropists, sometimes corporations. And what I really like about this is I think it gives us a 360-degree view of this landscape. So that's a little bit about For Impact. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we jump into content. Most importantly, I am lucky to do trainings like this around the world and be with all different groups of people. When I talk to groups, I aim to be as inclusive as possible. If you feel that I ever fail in this regard, please do let me know. I realize the place I come from, sitting in front of this group. So if I ever fail in this regard, please don't hesitate to let me know. Secondly, I love if we have engagement. There's going to be some time at the end where I'm going to ask a few questions and ask the group to kind of think through and share out together. However, you do not have to wait until that point to unmute, to raise your hand, to put something in chat. I'm not too good with monitoring chat while I'm speaking, but I know someone else, yeah, Debbie just gave me a thumbs up. So I know someone else will be able to do that. So Debbie, anyone else, cut in, unmute at any point. I think sometimes the real magic out of these sessions comes from the ability to engage in live time. Okay, so I was lucky to do that session last July on the anatomy of a funder visit, where we talked about, if you've got an hour or 30 minutes with a funder, this is perhaps a flow you might think about using. And then I was able to watch the incredible team at Black Fox Philanthropy do a session in late last year on funder-centric communications using their 3-step core messaging process. So these last 2 sessions, I think by and large, it's safe to say, we're focused on how do we communicate with funders in an effective way? How do we share our vision? How do we talk about our priorities? How do we share stories? And how do we get funders excited about the work we're doing? All right, how do we get them excited about the work we're doing? And how do we get to a point where we can present them with the opportunity to partner with us? All right, so I don't know if anyone in this group had this feeling, but I wondered if some of you are thinking, this communication stuff is great. I got it. Check. We need to have a good message. We need to be able to share our highest level vision. We need to be able to connect around that. But where are these funders that you're speaking of? Right? I can communicate, all day long, but how do I find the funders? How do I get that visit? So that is the goal of today. The goal of today is to talk about a prospecting process to help you identify funders, prioritize them, and then ultimately strategize them. Okay, so let me share my screen here. This is my first facilitation of 2023. And as I was prepping, I was thinking something is going to go wrong because I haven't done this in a month and a half. Okay, so bear with me if you don't mind. Okay, so here's the flow of what we're going to do today. I am going to spend some time talking about kind of a 3-part framework that we use when prospecting. And you guys, as I talk today, as I share some of these tips and tricks with you, when we talk about a prospect, we're casting a really wide net. We're thinking of individuals, foundations, corporations, institutional funders like governments or very large foundations. I kind of put them in that institutional funding bucket. So this methodology and this approach for us works regardless of the type of funder. So we're going to talk about how to identify, prioritize, and strategize prospects. And then I'm really, really excited to share with you that I've brought a friend along, Rose Thuku, who's the executive director of the Nafasika Trust, this incredible organization doing life-changing work, no doubt about it, in Kenya. So I'm going to let Rose share a few stories with you towards the end of the hour. We're going to then just spend a little bit of time talking. We're not going to go to breakout rooms today, but we're going to kind of talk as a group. And then Debbie, I think you'll have some take-home learnings. So pay attention. So you guys, let us start with talking about how to find a qualified prospect. That's the first thing I want to do today. I want to think about how can we find a qualified prospect. I wonder, by show of hands, either real life hands or virtual hands, how many people in this room have spent too much time, energy, effort on a funder that turned out not to be a qualified prospect? All right, I'm going to try to scroll down. Who in here has spent too much time, energy, effort on someone who turned out not to be a qualified prospect? I see some hands. I know some people have, thank you for people who are giving the thumbs up or virtual stuff. I totally understand if cameras can't be on, of course. Yeah, me too. Me too. So I don't know many people in this room well, but I would be willing to bet that nobody on this call has enough time for fundraising. All right. I suspect and would bet money that no one on this call has enough time for fundraising. So if that's the case, or resource mobilization, and I believe it to be, then how can we ensure that that time you do spend fundraising is an efficient use of your time? We need a return on your time spent fundraising. So first tip, let us make sure we are only with qualified prospects, okay? I want to spend a little bit of time crowdsourcing this, okay? This is worth it, I think. So I want to spend a little bit of time crowdsourcing. I'm going to pull up the chat or ask people to unmute. When you are looking at who is a qualified prospect for your organization, what are some characteristics you think that they would have? All right, can somebody unmute or can somebody put in chat? What are some characteristics of a good prospect for your organization? And I'll give it a second for chat to kind of
Credible.
catch up.
Someone with the credibility.
Yep, love it. Thank you. Okay, credibility. And I'm sorry, I've got so many things open. I can't see names, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for unmuting. Alignment of purpose, work in our region, shared interests. Yep, keep going, guys. This is great.
They have to be willing to have to be working in systems change and thinking that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Currently,
and it sounds like whoever said that, good history, good job. Yeah, that's great. Whoever said systems change, I presume the organization you work with is also, you know, very invested in systems change, right? Good history. Yep. I would say, I'll make a note about that in a second. Anybody else? Linkage, interest, and ability to give. Yes, I'm going to say their capacity to give, interest. This is great, you guys. When we look at all of the characteristics of a good funder, it really comes down to two things. And I think we said these two things many different ways. It comes down to capacity and a connection to the cause. Okay, so I think when you look at everything we just shared, we just crowdsourced what makes a qualified prospect. There needs to be capacity and there needs to be a connection to the cause. What I see a lot of times is we might have a connection to a funder with capacity, but who is not connected to our cause. All right, that's probably not going to be a good use of our time to really work hard to further that relationship. I'm not saying let's not explore it at all, but I'm saying when we're ranking our prospects, that's probably not our best. Likewise, we might have someone who's very connected to your cause, but not a lot of capacity. All right, now this isn't to say that they can't help us in other ways. Of course they can. They could write op-eds and they could be a connector and they could talk about our work. So that's all really important. But I think when we're looking at our qualified prospects, we want prospects with capacity, connection to cause, and bonus points if they are philanthropic. Now, foundations, they are philanthropic. They exist to give away money, right? Individuals, you know, we're going to have a hard time converting someone into a philanthropist if they're not already philanthropically minded. All right. Corporations, let's look, do they have a good CSR, you know, mission? Okay. I'm embarrassed to admit that 6 years ago when I started this work, I was helping, just pro bono, helping a friend of mine whose son went to a school for children with autism. Nonverbal children with autism. And we had somebody who had capacity, even had a connection to the cause, but they were not philanthropic. And it was somebody that I had the entire staff do a lot of work prepping for this amazing visit. And at the end of the day, this person donated a few handbags for an auction. Okay, so let us make sure that we are in front of qualified prospects. So when we think about our prospecting framework, I just talked about the qualified prospect has capacity, connection to cause. All right, let us move on. That's the simplest part we'll do today. Okay, so this is a 3-part prospecting process. The value of this visual I'm sharing with you is that this is 3 steps. If you walk away today with nothing else, what I would love for you to hear is that this is a 3-step process. I'm going to even draw big bold lines in there to like really emphasize my point. All right. When we are identifying prospects, potential funders, I don't want anyone in this room to, let me see if I can do this without doing too many negatives, to not write somebody down, to not write some foundation down because they don't know how to get to that. Let us think about how to get to that funder once we're over here and once we're strategizing. All right. So I want us, when we are identifying funders, I want us, if we can do a little bit of word association, when we think about identify funders, I want you to think about being fearless. All right. This is an issue of posturing. All right. This is an issue of posturing. We need to approach this identify step as though these funders are just waiting for us to find them. All right. Once they hear about us, they're going to think, gosh, we're so glad we know this organization exists. So when we identify, we want to be fearless. At this moment in time, please do not think about, I don't have a way to get to that funder. Because the one thing I can guarantee you is you will not get to that funder if we don't at least identify them and write them down. Once we write them down, then we can take proactive steps to get there. So let me break this down just a little bit more, if you will. All right, so step 1, identify. How do we identify? You know, there's probably someone on this call thinking that. How do we identify? Thank you, guys. I woke up with like this really sore throat, so I'm going to probably be drinking a lot of water during our time today. All right, so how is it that we're going to identify funders? Step 1, I would ensure that you are maximizing your current funders. Okay, so before we go out and start coming up with new names, let's just take a quick look and make sure each funder we currently have is maximized. All right, what does it mean to maximize? It means that we are with this funder one-on-one, over Zoom is just fine. We have shared our story. Like Natalie and the Black Fox team presented, we are using funder-centric communications. We have presented them the opportunity, we have made an ask, and we are expecting a yes or no answer. Okay, we don't ever want to make decisions for our prospects, right? We want to present them the opportunity and let them make the decision. This work in this sector is hard enough as is. We don't need to be making decisions for our funders and limiting ourselves. Okay, quick story about this. I was doing a session like this about 6 months ago, and someone came up afterwards. It was a live session. She funded this really incredible organization that works across the African continent to train young entrepreneurs. Okay, it's to, you know, address the youth boom on the African continent. And she said, you know, you got me thinking. A corporation in South Africa reached out to us recently and asked us to submit a proposal. So I submit a proposal, but I don't think, 1, I never had a conversation with them, and 2, I don't know that we've even tried to maximize them. So what she did that evening is she set up a visit, a call, a Zoom with the woman who asked her to submit the proposal. And the woman said, I'm so glad you reached out. I completely forgot we asked you to do that. And also, can we talk a little bit about your proposal? So the proposal was for $30,000 US. And by the end of the call, the woman was so on board with the work they're doing that she doubled it. Okay, this was a corporation in South Africa. Okay, so first, let us make sure we have maximized our current prospects. Let us not make decisions for that. Okay, 2, how do we identify new funders? All right, how do we identify new funders? We collect a lot of data at For Impact, and about 5 years ago, we looked at 100 organizations across the sector around the world, from tiny organizations to big organizations. And we looked at those organizations that were meeting their funding goals each year. And what we determined was that new prospects were unearthed in 2 ways. All right, they were unearthed through research and referrals. Friends, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't have a magic formula for how you can find new funders. I wish I could tell you like, here's the one way you've never thought about. Now go and do great things. This is, I hope, maybe giving you a little bit of peace of mind that there's not something out there that you're missing. It is doing research and referrals, but it is a matter of focus. All right. So for your organization, you might consider a goal of unearthing 3 new potential funders a week or 5 new potential funders a month, you know, however you want to set it. And you can certainly task your staff with this. This research component, we find it's a great job for new level, entry level employees, even interns. A couple ways we do research. One way is we think about what are your cause areas and then who's funding similar work. All right, so let's pretend like we have an organization that works on issues related to, I'm just making this up, poverty, social entrepreneurship, and maybe, you know, education. These are the areas where we work. We might even think about like making a Venn diagram here and thinking who's funding this work, who's funding this work, who's funding this work, and who's funding kind of the work in the middle. So we can look at who's funding similar organizations. Okay, think about your big cause words. And, you know, I wish there was like an exciting way to talk about this, but it really comes down to just doing the work online. All right. A quick story. In July of 2021, the UN held a summit on generation equality. And it was really a remarkable summit because I believe, if what I read is correct, it was the largest amount of money ever pledged. Everyone leaving that summit, there was $40 billion pledged to advanced gender equity. And what was different about this $40 billion pledged, as opposed to all the other, you know, great announcements made, is that they asked every organization that was pledging money to come up to present a strategic plan of how they were going to invest that money. So I am lucky to work with a lot of organizations working on gender equality. And so what we did was we made a list of every organization that showed up to that summit, everyone that pledged money, and what statements did they make? What did they say? And then what we did was we looked at who was lined up with the work we did. So one of them was PayPal, this corporation in the US, said that they were advancing opportunities for girls graduating secondary school. So any organization I worked with that had girls in secondary school, we reached out to PayPal. Hey, we saw that you just pledged all this money. Love the chance to talk to you about the work we're doing. So this is the research component. All right. Dr. Jackie, let me call on you real quick. I see your hand up.
Yes, Jackie, but I have to put this for other networks. Thank you. I wanted to go back to the maximizing the current funders and ask you what you think about the fact that sometimes international organizations playing as donors, you reach out to their local office and you work with them to a certain extent, but then you have to realize that maybe if you have the chance to go to the global office, let them know who you are and have them communicate with their local office, your chances might be much greater. I don't know what you think about that, but I have actually a little story about that I'm not going to bore you with, but I don't know if you got what I'm saying.
I believe me, I do understand what you're saying, Jackie, and thank you for commenting. We're seeing this more and more, right? As proximate giving is becoming more important to the large funders. This is an unsatisfying answer, and I apologize for it. I think it needs to be a case-by-case basis, dependent upon, you know, the communications we're receiving from that funder. If a funder is telling us we have completely given up all decision-making to the country offices, then I probably would keep it there and not try to, you know, go around the procedures that they have set up. But if it's gray, then I think, yeah, a lot of times it might help to go to the larger entity and just, of course, do so in a way that you're including perhaps the country directors as well. But I'm happy to talk more offline. I see this all the time, more and more each year. Yeah, thanks. Okay, guys. So the other, you know, we talked about research. I'm sorry I can't give you like a really exciting way to think about research. It is We just need to put in the time. We need to carve out the time each week, each month, whatever it may be. The second way is referrals. Let us never leave a meeting or a conversation about our organization without saying something along the lines of, do you know anyone else who would be interested in this work? Do you know anyone who might like to hear about the work we're doing? Sometimes you identify a funder and we have no way to get to them. We've tried everything. So perhaps we could leave a meeting saying, hey, we're trying to get to so-and-so at the Gates Foundation. Do you have any connections there? Would you be willing to help us out in reaching this person? Okay. There is a study out of a university here in the United States called the University of Michigan. And this study found that 90% of generosity is unlocked by asking. True story, you can Google this. So the bad news is that 10% of generosity is done without an ask. But the good news is that what we can take from it is by asking, we are going to unlock generosity. So if we can ask for connections or ask who else should we be hearing, who else should we be speaking to, this is a way that we're going to unlock some generosity. One quick tip on referrals. You might find it helpful for your organization to create what we call an ideal prospect persona. All right, sometimes if you say to an individual, hey, do you know anyone who should be hearing about our work? They might say, let me think and I'll get back to you. And then sometimes we never hear again, okay? Sometimes we never hear again. And so what we might do is spend some time thinking about what would our ideal prospect look like? And this could be of any flavor, it could be an individual, a foundation, a corporation. And we might say, hey, we're really looking for a foundation who is very invested in M&E and who will help us develop an M&E program for this, pilot that we're running. Or, hey, we're really looking for an individual who's a pediatric oncologist who has done some service work in Mexico. Do you know anyone like that? Sometimes by giving a more concrete example of who we're looking for, there's just something might unlock in someone's mind where they can help us connect to a person or a funder like that. Okay, so you guys, this is the identify bucket in our 3-step process. I'm going to just say it one more time for good measure. We just need to be fearless. At this point, don't say to yourself, there's no way I can get there. All right, at this point, let us write down anyone who we think is a good qualified funder. And what makes a qualified funder? Capacity and connection to cause. And hopefully philanthropic. All right. So step 2. All right. We have now identified our potential funders and we have probably a leads list, and maybe that leads list is growing by the month. What do we do with it? The next thing we need to do in this process is prioritize that list. So when we think about prioritizing, we want to be systematic. This comes back to what I said earlier, that nobody in this room has enough time for fundraising, right? Sad reality. So if you have 2 hours a week to devote to this, who should on our prospect list should we be focused on? That's one thing. The second thing is that by and large, for most organizations, about 90% of their funds will come from about 10% of their funders. By and large, across the sector, most of us receive most of our funding from a few prospects. So if that's the case for your organization, we want to make sure that we are focused on the top of our prospect list before we move on down. Okay, so as we prioritize our funders, what we want to do, everybody, is rate and rank them. And I know this might sound a little heartless, but this is in an effort to preserve your time. All right, this is in an effort to preserve your time. Now, Catalyst 2030 made a donor pipeline template. It's awesome. Maybe someone can throw it in the chat right now, someone from the Catalyst team. It's a really great template. The one thing I would add to it is a way to rate and rank in there so that we are looking at our top prospects first and then systematically working down the list. Now, you guys, that's my takeaway, rate and rank. How you do it is really up to you. Let me just show you one way that you might think about this. Is a very simple way. You might look at their capacity and give them a score of like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And then you might look at their connection to the cause and give them a score of 1 to whatever. This is an art, not a science. It's something where we should be spending about 5 seconds thinking about, oh, there are 3 here and a 5 there. How do we know their capacity? just a bit of internet research. If it's a foundation, the capacity is high. If it's an individual, we might do a little bit of Googling. If it's a corporation and we know they do CSR, we can just kind of gauge it. Again, an art, not a science. It's just a way to put some order to this big list of leads we have. My fear is that otherwise you are looking at an Excel of 30 entities or 50 entities, and it's just easier to close that tab and work on your programs. Okay, that's my fear. And so I want to have some order to this list of yours. Now, that's a really simple way, capacity and connection to the cause. You might put other metrics in there, previous gift history, timing, like when is an application due, things like that. You might weigh them differently. My takeaway really is just to have a methodology to rate and rank that works for your organization. And I'll make sure you guys have my email address. It's quite easy. It's just lisa@forimpact.org. Maybe Debbie, if you don't mind throwing it in the chat. I really am so bad at doing two things at once. If you want to talk about different ways to rate and rank, I've got a lot of different ideas and examples, but just have a way to do it is my big takeaway. All right, so at this point, we have been fearless as we've identified our funders, our potential funders. We have been systematic as we've rated and ranked them. And now we need to strategize. We need to strategize these funders. All right, we're going to strategize them in two ways. We are going to strategize to get a visit in the first place. This is a challenge, no doubt about it. Okay, and then we are going to strategize once we have the visit. How are we going to approach it? So I think of there being two ways: strategize how to get a visit. And you guys, when I talk about visit in 2023, I don't need anyone like flying around the world to do visits, right? Like just jumping on Zoom or even a phone call, a WhatsApp call. These are visits in my vernacular. And secondly, how to do the visit in the first place, okay? All right, so when we talk about strategizing, if I can do this word association with you all again, I would say the word I think about and that I work with the orgs that I support, when we think about strategizing, we are courageous. We are courageous. Again, it kind of comes back to posture. We think they don't know about us yet. They don't know about us yet. This is a true partnership where a funder can bring resources to the table, but we can bring impact to the table. We need to approach it with, they just need to hear about us. They haven't given yet because they don't know we exist. All right. So step one, how do we get a visit? I want to focus on a couple words here, and that is remember the last investor strategy. This is a great mental model for us to employ on our top 5, 10 fund prospects, maybe. We can't do it on everyone. We do not have the bandwidth, no doubt about it. But what if our top 5 prospects, we pretended like they were the last investor? Like this funder is the only entity standing between us and having to close our doors due to lack of resources. What would we do if they were the last investor? Would we shoot off an email, and if they don't respond and, say, well, we tried, we tried our best, they just never responded, I guess they aren't interested? No, certainly not. If they were our last investor, we would dig deep. We would get creative. We'd pull everything out that we have. We'd use all the tools at our disposal. So when I think about how to get that visit, especially for your top funders, once you've rated and ranked them, I would use that last investor strategy for your top 3 or 5. I worked with an organization recently that was trying to get in front of the IKEA Foundation, and they bought a cheap piece of IKEA furniture. They didn't want to spend a lot, so they bought something very affordable at IKEA, and they made a video of themselves building the furniture while they talked about their work and sent the video to them. Okay, it's cute. It's like a way to kind of come across their radar. We can't do this for every funder, right? Like your programs would screech to a halt. But for our top funders, we might think about doing something like this. Who else can we ask to help us get that visit? Is there a government official that can send an email on our behalf? Is there a board member? How else might we think about getting this visit? In the United States here, my family and we serve as a foster family. I don't know if that term translates to everyone, but we've taken kids into our home whose parents are currently and hopefully temporarily unable to take care of them. So we foster through a nonprofit organization, and the development director, often when she's having a hard time coming across a funder's radar, she asks, can I write the funder a letter with a pen and a piece of paper? And can I share like my journey in fostering and how the nonprofit has helped us? And of course, I'm happy to do that because I would like more resources in the children's services field as well. And so who else could a beneficiary write a letter on your behalf? So this is just to say, let's think deeply and strategically about how we can get that visit. All right. This is our time to really to think through, how are we going to come across their radar? Might we send a book with an inscription? Okay. So let's just think big and bold. Debbie or somebody is going to put in the chat 3 tools that we use at For Impact, and these are available to you. There are 3 tools we use. One, as we look at our funders, we have 3 tools. One is a knowledge base. This is one where we just kind of like keep background information on a funder. This is where we're kind of just building, oh, there's a press release, they just gave, money to this, let's link it in there. The second is a prospect strategy. Okay, and I'm gonna actually share it right now. The second is a prospect strategy. And one of the purposes of a prospect strategy, let me just turn this way and see if that works a little better, is to think, how are we going to get the visit? So we're going to think of our relationship goals. What would it mean to maximize that relationship? And then how are we going to get the visit? This is where we think like, who on our team can we pull in? Okay, so we're going to strategize how to get the visit in the first place. Okay. Then step 2, we need to strategize the visit itself. Okay. And for that, we use this visit strategy checklist. I'm sorry, this visit checklist, we call it. We liken it to an airplane pilot who, takes off and lands, dozens of times a week, right? Regardless of their experience and expertise, they still run through a checklist each time they're landing. We do the same thing at For Impact. Each time we have a visit, we run through this checklist. And so I'm not gonna read the whole thing to you. You guys can peruse it on your own time. And of course, reach out to me with any questions, but we're going to look at like, what do we want to accomplish on this visit? What do we need to learn? Like, what questions should we think about? Who has what role on the visit? What are questions we should ask to transition towards our goals? What potential challenges might a funder present to us? How can we respond to those? This is my favorite. What will you say if the funder asks, how can I help? So this is another big takeaway I'd love for you to have today, is to always have an answer to that question. Not, we'll get back to you, after I go talk to my executive director, or after I talk to the board, or let me go write a proposal. I want us to have an answer. What will we say if the prospect says I can't? So we do the checklist like this before every visit. So at this point, we are strategizing. Let me turn it back this way. We are strategizing, 1, how to get a visit, and 2, how to do the visit. This 3-part model, first we identify, then we prioritize, then we strategize, I hope will provide some order to your prospecting work, some next steps that you can take. Before I introduce my friend Rose to share a few stories with us, I want to just share one last story from For Impact that kind of shows this framework from beginning to end. So about 10 years ago, before I worked at For Impact, I wish this story I personally witnessed, but it's too good for me not to share. Before I worked at For Impact, we had a client called the Beatitude House. They are a domestic violence shelter for women in Northeast Ohio, which is an area that has really been hit hard economically over the last few decades. This Beatitude House was run by a group of sisters, Catholic nuns. And when they were working to identify funders, they identified a funder who came from the region and had since moved out to California and whose family owned a professional sports team, okay? So they knew that she had capacity, and they knew that she was connected to the cause, 1, because she hails from the same region, and 2, because she was on record at some point in one of her many press conferences as saying that women's safety was an area that interested her. There was no way to get to this woman. And these are Catholic sisters who are very devout and working very hard in Northeast Ohio, but are not, very well connected. Okay, suffice it to say. So what they did, once they identified this woman and then they prioritized and they found out she was their number one prospect, then what they did is each week, my friend who worked with this organization, they sat down and they said, how are we going to try to get to her? They made it a matter of focus. Okay, so what they did was they called the front office of the professional sports team and they said, can we please get to the person who runs her schedule? And they said, this person said no. And so they sent some newspaper clippings in the mail. And ultimately they were able to get to the scheduler. The scheduler said many times, there's no time this quarter. There's no time this quarter, but they kept just reaching out. They set a calendar for, ding for themselves. They reached out on a quarterly basis 3 different times. At some point during this time, this woman sent a check to the Beatitude House, and everybody celebrated that we were on the right track, but we had not yet maximized her because we hadn't sat with her one-on-one. We hadn't made an ask. We hadn't presented the opportunity. So long story short, 18 months later, she's back in Northeast Ohio. They were able to schedule a visit. They showed her around the house. She was able to speak to some women, and she made a transformational gift for this organization. The reason I share this story is my friend who helped, who helped with this prospect strategy. What they did at the end of it was they added up how much time they actually spent on this funder. And up until the visit, where they did a lot of work to prep for her visit, up until the visit, they'd spent about a total of 75 minutes on securing the visit. It was not a function of how much time they spent. It was a matter of focus. By each week, looking back at what have we done this week to advance this funder, they were able to ultimately get that visit. Okay, and again, this is the power of being fearless as we are identifying prospects. Don't limit ourselves because we don't have a way to them. Okay. One last thing about prioritizing our funders, that list we make of our funders that we've ranked from top to bottom, that should constantly be changing. We are working to constantly move funders up, down, or off our list. All right. It is a living, breathing document. And we are working to move them up, down, or off the entire time we're working. Okay, I'm going to catch up on the chats as I introduce my friend Rose. I'm super excited to introduce everyone here to Rose Thuku, who I've had the privilege of working with a couple times. Some of Nafisika Trust's funders have introduced us, and so we've had the chance to work together a couple times. And I wanted to bring her along today so she can kind of share a view from the field and share how she has employed some of these strategies over the years. Rose, so welcome. Thank you for joining. I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Nafisika Trust.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa. Please confirm if you can hear me clearly. Well,
yeah,
thank
we can
you.
hear you.
Right. So my name is Rose Thuku, currently serving as the Executive Director at Nafisika Trust. I'm really glad to be here together with Lisa. We highly regard for impact as partners within Nafisika Trust. And Nafisika Trust is an organization that has been existing for a little over 13 years, supporting the Kenya Prison Service. It was founded by our director and a phenomenal woman called Vicky Wambura back in 2007, but officially registered in 2009. And since then, we've been working with the Kenya Prison Service, impacting at least about 30 prisons through our projects and our programs within Kenya. We're based in Nairobi. And basically, our name Nafisika is based from Nafsi. Nafsi is a Swahili word meaning bringing to well-being. And for us, it's all about rebuilding, restoring, and transforming lives within our prison systems, and not just for our incarcerated individuals, but also the institutions and also prison officers. So basically, that's why we exist and why we do what we do. But also as an individual, Rose, I focus on strategy, fundraising, project management, coordination, organization management. That's my forte when it comes to work. So I'm truly excited to be here, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Rose. I've been a big fan of Nafisika Trust since I very first learned of the work you guys do. You're in a space that's a little bit lonely. There's not a lot of other organizations or even a lot of funders who are funding this work. So Rose, today we talked about kind of this framework of identifying funders, prioritizing, and then strategizing them. Can you share how you and the team at Nafisika Trust have used any of this in your fundraising efforts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me say this. I take this model, the identify, prioritizing, and also getting whoever you need on your space as the way you do design thinking. So you first have to start planning, right? So for us, currently, we actually have a funder we have identified. We just recently drafted our 2023-2026 strategic plan. And with that, we need funding. And we had to identify the people we needed on board. So for us, it was very important first to align with a funder that identifies with our work. So when I say identifies with our work, I'd say these potential funder, mutual areas that we actually relating with include our value system. They align our community. It's a community-based organization that supports organizations that create sustainable change. They support sub-Saharan Africa organizations. And pretty much this is where we actually fall and what we do. So for us, we first had to prioritize them as our number one. And after we noticed they actually fit, especially the plan we have even moving forward, we then asked ourselves, how then can we get to them? Who do we have within our circles who can actually help us get to them? How can we reach out to them? And so in 2022, what Lisa mentioned, I happened to be in 2 fellowship programs where we were getting trained and they were introducing us to funders. So this was an opportunity, and they asked us, who do you want us to bring on board as a funder to come and for you to pitch? Because it was actually a fellowship program where you even get to pitch what you have and you secure funding. So they were brought. Nafisika, I wrote them, number one, this is basically our potential funder and we need them on our space. And after we did that, they passed materials, access, and we even got someone actually from the organization who reached out to us. Interestingly, after the pitch, even before us reaching out to them, they actually reached out to our network and told them, we need to get Nafisika's presentation because we are interested. I was like, yes, we have your attention. That is good. So that's how far we got to them. So we are pretty much at the introduction. And right now in 2023, we are pushing to see how can we get the same funder to come on board, who can actually help us even, be the connector to the work that we are doing. How can we go beyond just showing them the presentation and the pitch that we had and sharing in terms of the mutual areas that we have? So that's pretty much, I'd say, when it comes to, first identifying, then you prioritize, then now you get to, the funder that you need to come and work on board with you. So that's where we are at. So that's our first example. That's for the potential funder. So in terms of, I don't know if I should go to the next example, Lisa. All right.
That's great. Rose. Thank you.
Right. So as Lisa mentioned, right now we have funders who are already our current funders. One of them being Women First International Fund. Maybe some of you have heard of them. So just a brief of what Women First do. They actually support organizations that work to support women, and their focus, they have 2 key focus areas, which includes organizational effectiveness and also creating sustainable models for women and girls to have, livelihoods that are good, financial independence for women. And lo and behold, Nafisika, that's where we were at when we first met them in 2017. So our founder, when she was pitching at the time, we were working with the Goreti Rehabilitation Center for Girls That's a girls' rehabilitation center. And we were also working with an adult prison institution for women called Thika Women's Prison. And we were working also with a Boston institution. So when Women First came in, and when we pitched our idea to them, because our whole idea for Nafisika is challenging the idea of recidivism because of economic base, because most people who go to prison is because of economic based issues. So we wanted to create, we train them in prison because that's what Nafisika does. We train them in life skills, in entrepreneurship. We teach baking. We actually have 3 baking stations in prison in Kenya set up by Nafisika, fully set up by Nafisika. And then now when they get out, they actually use these skills to set up businesses for themselves. So that's an idea that Women First really liked because they're supporting women. So at the time when we reached out to them, they fund in 3 different stages. They fund at opportunity stage, they fund actually at leverage stage, and also they fund at the third one is actually escaping my mind, but they find at 3 different stages. And within these 3 different stages, they actually give you a certain amount of money. So we started out with them officially in 2018. And with the first funding, the first proposal that we put to them, we were to support 2 prisons. After we worked with these 2 prisons, we saw the potential of this funding supporting more prisons. As we are speaking now, the funding that Women First has given us has reached out to 8 women prisons and 2 Boston institutions. So that was definitely a plus. And us giving our pitch that we need to get to the leverage stage with you because this is why we want to continue what we want to do. And that was something that Women First was really excited about, because first, we actually increased our reach when it comes to the women we are reaching out to. And also it was equally aligned with the purpose of the grant with which our Women First gives out. So right now we are in Wundanyi, we are in Meru, Kiambu, Nyeri, Machakos. These are counties in Kenya, and we are reaching out to women which now fit their mission as funders, and also it fits our mission also as an organization to rebuild the lives of our women in prison. So basically I could say these are things that actually were met. And with our engagement with Women First, they also allowed us to access other networks as well through training at organizational level, and also through improving our programmatic activities to reach out to more women. So those are 2 examples I'd give of a potential funder and a current funder who are actually setting us up to get more funding. Yeah.
Rose, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing a view from the field and how you're able to do this, how you're able to mobilize resources while you're doing the work. So guys, we have about 5 or 6 minutes before I'm going to hand it back to Debbie, if that's okay with you. So we can do 2 things. I'll let you all decide. You can either ask Rose or I a question. So we're open for Q&A, or I'm putting in chat. This is a great processing question that we often use when we facilitate. If anybody wants to take to share something from this hour that stuck out to you, why it resonated with you, and how you might apply this to your organization going forward. It's a 3-part question, but what we find is that people often get a lot out of hearing from others how they might apply some of this information to the work they do. So let me just stop talking and open it up either for questions for Rose or I. And then alternatively, if anybody would like to share something that stuck out to them and how they might apply it to their organization, I would be so grateful. Yeah, Jackie, thank you.
Okay, so actually it's a question. The other day we had a session about proposal writing that I had the honor to moderate, facilitate, and give my own input. And something we all agreed on, that many important donors believe in history and they want to work with people who have history in managing grants. So, but that history, we all know, has to start somewhere. So now that you're talking and tackling all the aspects of fundraising, what would be your advice to all of us? Because I may know some things, but I'm missing out on many others. And I want to thank you for the passion that we all felt in the way you delivered the material. Really, thank you so much to you and to Rose. I do have some experience, but I learned many things today as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Rose, you don't have to, but do you have any thoughts on Jackie's? Otherwise, I'll jump in. Have you ever found a funder not as aligned with Nafisika because they wanted more history?
So history is always actually a big question. And yes, we have actually been in that position. This is what I'll say. I'll use an example of a project we are currently doing. It's called the Uhai Prison Project, where we're actually supporting prisons with sanitary care packs. What we did is we had very little money even as an organization. In fact, that we raised about $350 amongst ourselves as a team. And then we did the first project with one prison. After we did that project, we now pitched using that project to other funders. And now, because of that, we actually raised about more than 250,000 Kenyan shillings for that very same project. That's, I think, about 2,500 USD. So I'd say this, start from where you have, use what you have. Most of the times funders want to even see what have you used with what you have, even the little that you have, then how can you maximize with that? And that's what I can say even across what you've done. Use what you have, and then now you can pitch with that. That's my response. Yeah.
I love that, Rose. The only thing I would add, Jackie, to Rose's brilliant example was there have been one, it might not be a qualified prospect for your organization. If they require like 10 years of M&E, let us not spend time on them. It's a sad reality, but they might just not be a qualified. Even if we have a connection, they may not be qualified. Two, this is a true partnership, right? So perhaps we could go to this funder and say, we don't have the amount of data you want or the impact numbers you want, whatever it may be, but here's our plan to do that. Would you help fund us in developing our M&E function? Would you? Sometimes they're willing to help build the plane midair. So that's another idea.
If I may add one more thing, maybe not in the US, but in related to the EU funds, the most common way is to build a consortium. And even for that, even if you're a small beneficiary of a small part of the project, they rather work with organizations who have the history. And this is something not my personal organization only, but many others across our region are facing. Even to get into a consortium is really, really hard. So yeah, that's why I insisted on clarifying this, but your input was greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great, Jackie, thanks. Debbie or anybody from the Catalyst team, is our 11 o'clock stop hard, or can I take I wanted to get to Howie's comment and you're grimacing, Debbie, it's the hard stop. Okay. I'll tell you what, whoever had their hand up, and Howie, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, please correct me, but can you guys both just shoot me an email? And we'll handle everything offline. And that goes for everybody, by the way. If anyone has follow-on questions, comments, wants to talk. Thank you, Jackie, for saying you can feel the passion. I am very passionate about fundraising. It's not about chasing money for me. It's about removing stress from the shoulders of the leaders who are doing incredible work. So that's what I'm here for. So thank you so much. And Debbie, I'm sorry, I'm cutting it so close. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rose and Lisa. We so appreciate your time. We have a quick poll. We'd love to have your feedback on these sessions. We like to prove our impact. of offering these learning series. So that poll will launch, and if you can fill that out in the next couple moments, we appreciate that. Second, we want to share with you that these resources are available to you. So we have put together a grant writing resource document that we're able to share with you, and you can share with others as well. These resources that Lisa provided, but also some other as well. Our take-home learnings, we want to make sure we have those learnings. Keep in mind the qualified prospect, capacity, able to work with you, and connection to your cause. The prospecting framework of identity, prioritize, and strategize. Make sure you go back and look at those notes. We will give you the slides with all her handwriting, so you'll be able to see those notes as well and share those. And if you're not a member of Catalyst, there's also some information on the slide deck as well. But if you can all join me in thanking this incredible group of speakers. Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much for Lisa from For Impact. We appreciate so much and love the notes about be fearless and just ask. You've got to get in the room. You got to be willing to make those conversations happen and ask, because it's the only way you're going to get those funding. So unmute, say goodbye to our speakers and thank them on your way out. Afternoon, morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. It was
everyone.
great.
Thank you,
Great session.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.